Welcome to Nocturnal Transmissions, the fortnightly podcast that brings you dark tales, both old and new, performed by your humble narrator, Kristin Holland. So, this is how it feels to be on the other side of your 100th transmission. I must admit, gentle listener, it's a nice feeling. Don't worry, we're not planning on taking our foot off the gas now we're in our dotage. Oh no, we're just warming up. On this, our 101st episode, we mark another event of note, our longest story title yet. This record was previously held by the preternaturally talented Jack Afon Rees, with his "My Neighbor's Just a Giant Spider in a Trench Coat," which we featured on our 36th episode. I'm afraid the crown must pass now to Aaron Vlek, as we proudly present their epic tale, Al-KITAB Al Ghoul, being the singular memoir of Ibn al-Warith, the only known son of Abdul al-Hazrad, called the Mad Arab by some. Enjoy, gentle listener. I used to be just like you. How long ago that was, I cannot recall. But I must have. I shudder to reflect upon that accursed time, and would banish all memory of it, but the regret that I was born as one of you. I too was possessed of a mind piteously small, uncomprehending of greater things, scurrying among a throng of fellow cockroaches fit only to be crushed beneath the heels of beings far, far greater than yourself. My history is of no importance, only that my father was either dead or a rogue who had accosted my mother in the shadows near the bazaar, or some other such fairy tale. Her family was of great wealth and class, and she saw to it that I was schooled in the best universities, al-Azhar in Cairo, Mecca, and finally, that most auspicious year in Baghdad. They had wanted me to become a medical practitioner, like the great patriarchs of my line, treating the maladies commonplace to wasting human flesh, and pondering the mysteries of that greatest adversary of all, death itself. I laugh now to think upon it. Little did they suspect what use I would make of their middling generosities, and the great destiny that awaited. But I must not move too quickly over this terrain, regardless of how small a role it would play in my ultimate coming into being. I languished at school and moved rapidly beyond the pale achievements of my fellow students, appalled as I was by the absence of any truly challenging questions and their utter rejection of the more innovative and inspired inquiries I sought tirelessly to advance upon them. So I spent the first 3 years of my university schooling consigned to the dungeon of crushing boredom. However, my fortunes took a momentous turn in my final year in Baghdad during the reign of al-Mustasim Billah, the last caliph of the Abbasids. I was taken under the wing of an exemplary individual of singular mind, a man who would lay open the seals upon my starving mind and let in the breath of the stars and all the dark celestial luminaries destined to feed the precocious spirit that I was. My mentor was known to me only as Old Nusrat, having disowned his name of faith and family many years before he ministered to the destitute among the city's poor and carried out his experimentations beyond prying eyes and worrisome scrutiny. I was in the bazaar one day, buying herbs and other obscure requirements for certain procedures I planned to undertake should a suitable subject become available to me, when an old man commented on the curious collection the shopkeeper was stuffing into leather pouches at my request. We shared a few words, then proceeded on to a tea shop where we conversed late into the night in hushed tones about various avenues of shared inquiry. I came away from that first meeting a changed man, and I have never looked back, but with the utmost contempt for so many years wasted in mundane academia. The next morning, Nusrat came to my rooms and requested that I accompany him to his home in Najaf, some 2 days' distance from Baghdad. I was eager to continue our conversations, so I went without question. Just outside the city's walls there was an encampment of beggars, lepers, and other unfortunates to whom old Nusrat was clearly a well-known figure. I assumed this was where he ministered to his patients, but it was for a very different purpose that we had come. Nusrat disappeared while I stood watch over our cart and horse. When he returned, he carried a large, unwieldy bundle over his shoulder. I helped him load the thing onto the cart, and I could tell it was the size and weight of a full-grown man. When we returned to Nusrat's compound, itself heavily guarded by several armed ruffians behind a high-walled courtyard, the old man opened the bundle, and I saw that my calculations had been correct. It was the body of a man, not long dead by the look of him, the shroud still bound tightly about his bony frame. I watched closely as Nusrat carefully washed and then exsanguinated the corpse, the blood now clotted and darkened with a blotchy hue. Nusrat would not allow me to assist, though I had done so at the university many times and was thoroughly adept at the art of dissection. There were a few minor irregularities in Nusrat's methods, but nothing untoward, so I held my tongue and took careful note of his actions. The next morning, Nusrat procured another corpse. This time he instructed me on the procedure and glared at me like a cat about to pounce as I went through the simple motions of opening the corpse's chest and draining the blood in the method he had used. As before, he locked the inky substance away in jars in a cabinet with a strange sort of seal and a curious gesture of his hand. On the third morning, Nusrat went to fetch the corpse, requesting that I remain behind and prepare the implements we would need in the procedure. Upon his return, he ordered me to undertake the dissection alone, as he had urgent matters to attend to in a nearby village, and would judge my work upon his return. I knew my skill was unparalleled. I was always meticulous in my handling of corpses, deft of hand in the stripping away of the skin and flesh, thorough and organized in the dissection and removal of the organs for categorization and review. This was critical, so that weighing and measuring of the skeletal structure could be done with accuracy and precision. After the specimens Nusrat chose for further examination were placed in special jars, what remained was cremated in the large furnace he had built for the purpose. All proceeded without issue that day. I concluded my work on the corpse in an exemplary manner and waited with confidence for my teacher's return, and the accolades he would surely rain upon me. When Nusrat arrived, it was well past dark. He carefully looked over my notes and the specimens I had prepared and catalogued and placed into the jars he had indicated. He was clearly pleased, and our work continued in this way for some time. We labored in the subterranean laboratory as he demonstrated his methods. We took our meals in a nearby cafe, and then we each retired to our rooms, as I had now fully moved into my master's compound. Late into the night, I would pore hungrily over the contents of his library, a thing of wonder, containing everything imaginable in the medical arts and sciences, modern and ancient, as well as a vast compendium of forbidden volumes by philosophers of the Christian and Hebrew worlds and beyond, as well as our own. Nusrat also possessed an extensive collection of works by rank heretics of all faiths and obscure unknowns as well. After a month of this work, carried out in a frenzied flurry of activity, Nusrat informed me that the real work of significance was about to begin. I went to my bed that night eager to mount even more challenging procedures, and I mark that day as the true hour of my birth, the moment I set foot upon the path to a destiny that has awaited me among the shadows for so long. When I awoke, Nusrat was already in his laboratory. Laid out and prepared was not one corpse, but 5. 3 were the victims of recent brutal violence and had not yet been washed, as is customary in faith, and dressed for the grave. They were coarse ruffians of the lowest sort who probably met their fates in some nightly misadventure, and I considered us lucky to have them for our research. The remaining 2 had been exhumed from their graves, though not yet advanced in their decay. That day unfolded in very sharp contrast to the previous occasions. Nusrat had always carried out the dissections with the utmost care and gravity, as is customary in orthodox medical settings. That morning, however, a heavy atmosphere of the darkest foreboding clung to the chamber, and I remained silent in anticipation for what was to come. Nusrat approached the first corpse, one of the ruffians, dressed in his finest robes, a long linen apron emblazoned with an unusual script spilling across the front. His razor-sharp peeling blade in hand, he looked down upon the grim face of death and mumbled a few words under his breath I could not hear. Nusrat presented an imposing visage as he towered over the corpse. I almost didn't recognize the man, so altered and severe was his countenance. And yet it was the man himself. I stood in awe, transfixed by his demeanor as he presided like a psychopomp before the gateway to an infernal eternity. Gazing towards the heavens, Nusrat roared a single word, a name I had never heard before. Only much later did I hear that name again and come to understand its meaning and terrible import. I shudder now at the merciful cloud of innocence that veiled me like a young bride in that moment, or I would surely have gone completely mad, having not been suitably prepared for that sacrament. Nusrat ministered to the corpses in turn, his hands moving reverently, his mind in deep concentration. He carefully peeled away and removed the corpse's epidermal layer, that first delicate silken veil that hides and protects the myriad unseen mysteries beneath. Then the dermis itself, the true skin of a man, lay revealed before our eyes. This too was slowly and methodically detached and peeled away, then set carefully aside in a large alabaster tray. The dermis removed, we beheld the hypodermis, that fatty connecting cocoon which binds the body of flesh, layers of skin, tissue, fibrous membranes, muscle and organs to that deepest and most miraculous basis of man's corporality, the skeletal substratum itself. With each descending layer, my master intoned the greatest verses of his secret formula, again in words that had no meaning for me, but which clearly held him in thrall. An overwhelming passion enlivened his face, and his body trembled delicately like a leaf in a breeze, and at times I thought I could hear him weeping softly. The precious organs of the body were then each separated and ceremonially placed in canopic jars, such as the ancient mage priests of Kem had employed. All the while the blood and other flowing substances drained away into a large chalice beneath the table upon which the corpse lay, and a cacophony of rich, heady fragrances clouded my brain with the dreams of 1,000 forbidden ecstasies. I grew faint and staggered briefly, but not from any lack of nerve or disquietude. I was set alight with a dizzying pleasure that blossomed within me in answer to all that I beheld, and threatened to take possession of my every fibre. Had Nosrat not presented so commanding and terrible a ministerial figure just then, I should have cried out, and I know not what. I know only that I longed, I craved with a near hysterical desire to, again I know not what. So I remained the captive, engrossed in the image of Nosrat as he took each corpse in turn and put it through the series of ritual disembodiments. When the operations upon the last corpse had been completed, he raised his arms to the heavens once again and intoned his final litany. Slicing away a piece of dripping viscera from the corpse, Nosrat put it to his lips, kissed it, and then slowly consumed it. Then his hands dropped to his sides, his eyes closed in prayer. I struggled to draw a breath. I was unable to move, my unblinking eyes locked on Nusrat's silent form beside the corpse. Then he shuddered and breathed deeply, then turned and glared at me intensely, searching, finding in my eyes the answer to his unspoken question. My master turned then and lifted another portion of the dissection to his lips and kissed it. As the Christian priest before his communicant, he raised the morsel before me, then pressed the cold, decaying flesh to my lips. I groaned, my eyes fluttered shut, and I took the offering in my hands, kissed it as Nusrat had done, and then, as he had done, I consumed it. Not as a greedy man starving for food, but as one partaking of a sacred prasadam, a holy food, a sacrament. My mind exploded, blossoming into 1,000 fragrant petals. I beheld mysteries I could not imagine the meaning of, and witnessed beings without number of fantastical shape and demeanor. I walked, flew, and cavorted over terrifying alien landscapes, unthinkable to my reeling mind, and officiated at ceremonies no human creature is worthy even to behold. I must have swooned in my rapture, vaguely aware of my surroundings as in a fading dream. Nusrat carried me from that sacred bloody chamber and put me to bed. Then I slept, I know not for how long. When I awoke, I was completely alone. The echoes within that place forestalled any search for my master. Yet another wave of discovery was about to break upon my shores. But I never saw old Nusrat again. I prowled the city by night in a daze, a wraith haunting darkened doorways, stealing food when I could find it, fighting feral dogs for scraps when I could not, greedily consuming the vermin and rats that littered the alleys. At dawn, I would return to Nusrat's laboratory, not knowing where else to go. Trapped between a hideous world I did not comprehend, Nusrat's world, and the dregs of mediocrity I had left forever behind. So I waited for some new affront to destroy the remnants of my sanity, or for death to deliver me into the arms of whatever awaits us beyond the portal of that final sleep. One morning I awoke with a start, leaping into a crouch and hissing like a feral animal. A low, inhuman chuckle emerged from the darkness like a noxious fume. I staggered to my feet, but saw nothing, and I might have been blind for all I could discern in the gloom. A torch suddenly flared nearby, but the hand that held that torch aloft was a vile thing, born of nightmares beyond those in which I was a familiar denizen. His robes were fine, those of a sheikh, but they were ancient, filthy, and covered with stains and strange designs crudely emblazoned over what remained of them. The flesh of his hands and face was as grey as that of the tomb, and covered with tattoos, and the warm effluvium that wafted from his body in waves sucked the breath from my lungs. He was a thing neither truly living nor fully among the dead. His skeletal, claw-like hands flexing menacingly toward me. I roared in outrage, demanding to know who he was and why he intruded upon me in such a manner. If he sought Nusrat, he was gone, I said, never to return. But the foul spectre just laughed, a hollow, mirthless cackle erupting in echoes from the depths of some dark interior cavern. The creature approached me, and I scrambled away into a corner of the room, paralyzed with a nameless fear. Grabbing me by the hair, the visitant dragged me to my feet and beat me so brutally that I knew death would surely come. But no, he flung me down a narrow stone stairway into the catacombs beneath Nusrat's laboratory and locked me in a dank chamber with bars on the doors. His eyes, two red coals, fixed upon me from the darkness. I lay there on the rotted straw on the stone floor, bellowing in anger, imploring him to tell me his name or to kill me and be on his way, as death was no threat to me. Again, he just laughed, his voice hideous, mocking, insane. stayed there in that dark pit, weeping and consumed by the agony of my wounds. Days passed. My body began to heal, and the pain of the bludgeoning the villain had rained upon me began to subside. Then the hunger took its place. He clearly planned to starve me to death, for I had not been given so much as a crust of bread or a cup of water, and still I had no idea who the creature was, or why he had come to me. When the ravages of the hunger had brought me to the very gates of death, and I could no longer even lift my head, the door to the cell swung open, and he appeared. I could not open my eyes, but I knew it was he and no other when he knelt beside me, and the rank breath and heat of his body was more than I could bear. I gathered what meager strength I had and tried to scuttle away like a broken spider, but to no avail. The creature held me down and pressed something against my lips. It was a rag soaked with a foul, stinging brine, but I sucked it as though it contained the water of life itself. I gagged, choked, and spat, unable even to thank him for this piteous boon. He helped me to sit up as I had revived slightly from the moisture I had consumed. He leaned me against a wet, moss-covered wall, and then dropped something soft and heavy into my lap. And I looked down in horror and disgust. He gestured for me to eat, but all I could do was stare in shock at the thing recently exhumed from some grave, ripped from its corpse and flung at me as an evening repast. Then he was gone. I contemplated all that had befallen me, my mind an empty corridor that no human foot had trod upon in eons. All I could do was sob in utter despair. Sometime later, the desperations of hunger overwhelmed me, and the smell of the rotting flesh, the severed arm of a full-grown man, galled my senses. My stomach lurched, but with nothing in it to bring forth. And then I halted, remembering my old mentor, Nusrat. How long had it been since he had disappeared? I looked again at the arm that lay nearby in the filth upon the floor, and wondered. I recalled then the many dissections we had undertaken together, Nusrat and I. The memories that had eluded me these many weeks washed over me with stunning clarity, a beacon that lighted the mind I had feared lost to me forever. I recalled, too, that last night with Nusrat and the unspeakable sacrament we had shared. I laughed nearly to hysteria. Then I lifted the rotting arm, gazed upon it approvingly and shoved the befouled flesh against my starving lips and fed like a beggar feasting at the head of the caliph's own table. The skin resisted for but a moment before yielding to my teeth and surrendering its bounty to my need. The unbearable sweetness of the flesh, so delicate, a nearly liquefied palliative in my mouth, caused me to shudder with delight. Oh, how I feasted, how I rejoiced, growing stronger by the moment, and blessing the creature who held me in mortal thrall for his generosity. And then I slept, deep and long, peaceful as a babe, warm and sated at its mother's breast. Al-Kitab Al Ghoul, being the singular memoir of Ibn al-Warith, the only known son of Abdul al-Hazrad, called the Mad Arab by some, by Aaron Vlek. What's that, gentle listener? You want more? Oh. Well, then you'll just have to tune in again in a couple of days' time, when we'll be releasing part 2 of Al-Kitab Al Ghoul, being the singular memoir of Ibn al-Warith, the only known son of Abdul al-Hazrad, called the Mad Arab by some. So, what's going to happen to our protagonist next, I wonder? Let's find out together on Thursday. This episode was brought to you with the generous assistance of our Patreon subscribers. A particular thank you goes out to our esteemed cohorts: Michael Wood, Sam Bell, Alex Brewis, Robert Troy Hampton Peterson, Evan Dooley, Chris McCauley, Shell, Stephanie Saloka, Alicia Townsend, J.B., Rachel Brown, Adam, Matt Ruprecht, and Z. See you again soon.